Maybe 3 or 4 months ago I thought I'd cunningly drop a way of reminding people to comment in the middle of a video by asking if people wanted me to make a video on another topic, and at least 2 people took me up on my offer by commenting, which as it happens is 1 more person than it usually takes. So here is that video on movie posters and why they kind of suck now. Turns out after doing some research they have always been a bit uniform and generic and had many of the issues I said suck with modern posters, with the ones I often bring up as being great from the 80s not actually even technically being movie posters. But to find out why, we need to go back to the very beginning of the movie posters history. Oh, by the way, like, comment and subscribe to this video you haven't actually watched. Apparently that's a thing YouTubers ask people to do. One I've never understood the logic of, but hey, I'll give it a go. It's 1870s Paris and the French are doing what they do best: eating cheese and surrendering to the Germans. Jules Charest is also inventing lithographic printing. This technique becomes all the rage and soon Paris is plastered with lithographic prints, advertising everything from cheese to armistice deals. By the 1890s it is also being used to advertise movies. The very first poster designed specifically to advertise a movie being the one for Le Roseur Arros, otherwise known as The Waterer Watered, a short movie where a gardener gets splashed in the face by a sprinkler. I will never complain that Hollywood has no ideas ever again, by the way, because this film sounds even more creatively bankrupt than a reboot of the Spider-Man reboot. The poster itself, however, depicts an audience watching the very scene where the waterer is watered. Rather strangely, it doesn't even include the film's name. This is also the first time a scene from a movie was used in an advertising poster, a trend that would continue throughout the very early years of movie posters, continuing well into the 1920s, by which time most posters consisted of hand-drawn illustrations depicting a scene and giving the name and maybe the stars of the film in text. And looking at a few examples, yeah, they have a lot of the issues that modern posters have too. They are all fairly generic. Usually when you scroll through 100 of them, they all meld into one, to be honest. Moving on to the 1930s, we get more varied typefaces used, and more of a focus on the main characters of the film rather than an individual scene being recreated, but again they are all fairly generic works, especially later examples where the backgrounds are less detailed and there is a tendency towards plain white backgrounds. It's very difficult at a glance to tell one from the other. By the 1950s and the burgeoning interest in sci-fi as a genre, we get far more experimentation with typeface and layout. Some posters really suffer from what is one of the issues I have with modern posters, that of having way too much going on, like this poster for The African Queen. There is so much going on here, it's impossible to focus on just one element. The top, middle and bottom all have varying contrasting colours and typefaces. The middle has maybe 4, maybe 5 scenes being depicted, as the 2 main characters there too, and it's really difficult to know what my eyes should actually be looking at. But at least unlike modern posters, this is colourful and eye-catching, and the hand-drawn illustrations took some form of artistic talent. By the 1960s, posters go a little bit minimal, not doing away with illustrations altogether, but putting far more emphasis on the typeface used, like this one for Breathless. It barely has any images at all, in fact. It also highlights the other trend of the 1960s, the withdrawal of hand-drawn illustrations and the introduction of the photograph, which is a trend that only accelerates during the 1970s and into the 1980s. By the 80s we basically have the movie poster we are very familiar with today, with very few changes being made to the actual format between then and now. Large photographic background with text at the top and bottom of the poster, with the image being around 60% and the text 40% of the content. And if you Google 80s movie posters, you can find loads of examples of ones that look exactly the same and are as generic and boring as modern posters. So why is it I and many others have a nostalgic love for old movie posters, and 80s ones in particular? Well, turns out in my case, I have a love of one type of movie poster, which isn't even really a cinematic movie poster, as they weren't used in cinemas to promote films. They are video posters, designed to catch your eye in Blockbuster on a Friday night and distinguish that movie from the other 400 Alien rip-offs on the shelf and get you to make an impulse purchase. Throw in the fact they mimicked the 50s action and sci-fi style, being hand-drawn and taking huge liberties with what they were depicting to make the film seem way more enticing than a mere photo ever could. Added to that is I tend to only bring up and remember the good ones, and not the bad ones, of which there were inarguably thousands of examples. I still think the majority of modern posters suck, don't get me wrong. They are boring and generic, and some of them absolutely do look like a small child got hold of Photoshop, but they are just continuing a long tradition in movie poster design. Anyway, that's all from me on movie posters. Don't forget to let me know what you think about movie posters in the comments, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Next week I'll be back reviewing movies with a viewer request. It's Space Hunter: Adventures in the Forbidden Zone.